Welcome to the She Wins podcast. I'm your host, Heather Sumlin, and I'm here with Dr. Penny Hetletved. And I got it right. I'm so excited.
Good job.
Um, Dr. Penny has her doctorate in leadership and education. She's a mental management certified coach and has been for many years. She works with all kinds of people, not just archers, which is the area in which I think you came to get certified in
I
initially.
did.
And then she's also a superintendent. So I'm really excited to just pick her brain on all things. Okay, Penny, are you ready?
I'm ready, I think. We'll
Okay,
see.
so give us a little bit of a backstory. Tell us a little bit about you. What would you like my listeners to know?
Oh, I think it's important to know I'm a little ranch kid that grew up in rural South Dakota, and we moved to North Dakota right before I went into high school. And so I think transitions and moves define us in different ways, and we have to figure out what we want to make of ourselves within those moves. I came from a very rural spot to having 24 kids in my class to graduating with 380 in my high school, which probably seems small to some listeners, right? But it was huge in that transition. Um, Met my husband in high school rodeo, and we will be married 30 years this June. Um, so there's that. We have two beautiful daughters, one through the journey of adoption and one through the journey of biology. And so I have two juniors, one in high school, one in college. Um, and then beyond that, this is my 30th year in education. So I have been a teacher and then became a principal, became a superintendent, and I was the director of education for the Department of Corrections for 20 years before I transitioned back to public school. And now I'm a K-12 superintendent of public school. Mental management, how I got there and where I am today is a longer story, but it has not only changed my life and how I run my life, but also a huge dynamic in my family, as well as the athletes and performers and leaders that I work with within that realm. So, how's that? That's
That's
kind of me in
good.
a nutshell.
Yes. Well, so I'm curious. Okay, so this is not a question that I had sent you in advance.
Okay,
And so
yeah,
you can scratch anything. We can edit all things.
perfect. Okay.
But my son is a teacher
Hmm.
and has been for the past, I think this is his fifth year in education as a teacher, and people are leaving the profession. What, as a superintendent, what are things that you wish that teachers either knew or felt so that they would maybe stay? Or, and then that might be a little touchy subject, but I'm just curious from your
Yeah,
perspective.
I literally just got back from Atlanta last week. I have had the good fortune of being selected as a North Dakota superintendent to participate in a project called Leading Now, and it was superintendents across the country talking about these things. Teacher fatigue is real, and some of the other extra expectations, it's way beyond the content area that you loved. I was an
Mhm.
English teacher by trade. I love all things English. Um, but I haven't been in the classroom for 20 some years. I've been an administrator that whole time. And for me to go back would be alarmingly different, because I see the work, I see the trends, but the significant amounts of mental health and
Mhm.
trauma needs that our kids have that are in public school, um, there's a reason for that. And I think people are leaving the profession as quickly as coming in for a couple different reasons. If we wanted to link it to mental management itself,
Mhm.
we prep people in their content area, so they are subject matter experts. We prep them very little in recovery strategies and how
Mhm.
they think about what they want to have accomplished and define it, and what they do when it doesn't quite hit the mark, right? So I think that's what's causing some of the fatigue. I think the other piece of fatigue is straight up educators have a deeper resource kit. And so industry loves educators because they make phenomenal HR officers, they make
Mhm.
phenomenal training directors, so they can choose different skills and not have to deal with an angry parent, an upset negotiation realm of your contract and different things like that, right? I mean, there's lots of other elements. So that's what's tough, I feel.
Good. And I think when we tie things to mental management, I think it's really important because for those of you who don't know, so mental management is really controlling your mind under pressure
Yeah.
for competition, essentially, but yet we can use it for life. So my next question, Penny, is what was there a defining moment in your life? And if so, what was that moment?
My journey to get to Lanny, mental management, you, and all of those pieces. I'm a woman of faith as well, and I think sometimes people are reluctant to offer that, but I feel that my journey was probably a little bit of divine intervention for lots of
Mhm.
different reasons. Um, I specifically sought out mental management because my oldest daughter had target panic, and she had come off one of the best seasons of her life to expectations in the story we tell ourselves blowing up her head of what was out of her control was not out of her mind. And we needed to figure out that freedom space to be able to have her run a mental system that would get her back on track and perform the way she wanted to perform. So that was really the premise of me getting there. But in that same time, I spent 20 years of my educational career in corrections. It's a tough gig. I was one of the youngest directors and a woman, and I don't use the woman card tons, but it is different in that I will call corrections an industry in a lot of ways, right? In that profession, um, there's not very many women in leadership in corrections, and so there were a lot of things in my job at that time, and I had some real big pictures, and being young and being in that arena and being in the direct, I was a direct report to the director of the agency, which was very unusual, who reported directly to the governor, right? um I needed mental management as much as my performing daughter in archery. And I think that was probably a defining moment where I started to see it in the kids I was serving in corrections. I went through Brian's piece within education too, and I wrote MISO 3 so students in North Dakota can get high school credit for mental management, right? And so I saw it in the need of the students I was teaching, I saw it in the need of my profession, and I saw it in the need of the sport that my daughters had chosen. And so um, I think that's really my defining moment, probably in my whole profession,
Mhm.
truly and authentically true. Yeah.
Yeah, for those who don't know, mental management was started and founded by my father, Lanny Basham, Olympic champion, had a mental failure in competition his first time at the Olympics, and interviewed Olympic champions to find out what they're doing differently about the mental game, created mental management, dominated a sport, and now teaches it across the globe.
Mm.
And so when Penny's talking about mental management, she's really talking about being able to be balanced in your life, controlling your thoughts, building your skills, building your self image, which is where your confidence lies. And I feel like our students are lacking the ability to control thought
Mhm.
and truly lacking the understanding of how to build self image. And
And the
so,
adults that own them.
oh, absolutely,
Yeah. Hmm.
absolutely. I was, and I think about that often because I feel like post COVID, or I say post COVID, COVID's still a thing, post lockdown, I feel
Yeah.
like our students really struggled and they struggled mentally, and now they continue to really struggle. So, have you noticed a difference? I mean, since you've been in education for so incredibly long, have you noticed a difference in maybe in the mental toughness of kids post lockdown, or do you see it
100%.
different?
Yeah. I think I think two things. One, there's no question there was learning loss across our
Mhm.
nation within that piece, right? And then the other part of it is, and I'm techie. Technology is a necessary piece of education. It's not going away and all those things. But I do think during lockdown, technology became an unhealthy full-time linkage to our adolescent kids.
Mhm.
And with that, then, your brains aren't fully developed until you're 24, 25, 26 years old. And the adjustment of what they were thinking, what they were believing, what they were experiencing, and then the social media piece of target audience to kids
Mm-hmm.
really adjusted a lack of empathy. I feel a higher degree of mean girl, mean boy, bad, nice girl, nice boy type of philosophies. Um, and then I do think it increased our mental health piece. I think there's a direct linkage to that. People weren't used to those
Mm-hmm.
constraints. And, statistically, I was still in corrections when COVID hit, and we were the only school in North Dakota that continued to operate because our kids were adjudicated and living right there. So my teachers, you want to talk about burnout, they were gloved, masked, gowned, shielded, continued to teach every day. COVID test with a swab up your nose or whatever, or through your throat, whatever was the test of choice. And that was weekly, every week for 18 months. Um, so I think the mental health piece of that, and statistically, the domestic violence went up,
Mm-hmm.
so an increase in trauma throughout that time and layoffs. And so the increase of poverty that linked to trauma has a huge, huge impact in our society. And I think we'll feel that for decades.
So what do you do to build the confidence of your maybe maybe your employees, maybe your students?
Mhm.
How do you handle that as a superintendent?
This is my second year of having left corrections. So I am in a smaller town compared to where you're at, right? But
Mhm.
we're growing, and we are 410 kids pre-K through 12. And I love it here. I think some of the things that I've done is I think it's very important that they know that failure is necessary for our striving of excellence. And so I work very hard to salute people that maybe miss the mark, but were willing to be vulnerable to try something. Um, I created the mantra here of "It's a great day to be a cardinal," because
Mhm.
um, that is our mascot. And so I try to celebrate little things and big things as "It's a great day to be a cardinal." And then when we have trouble, I think it's important too. Then we say, um, "And cardinals are still going to be resilient and shine because we know what it takes for this, this, and this." So that's important. My in services and my all staffs, I always bring something to the table that is pretty directly mental management. At this point, frankly, I probably just need to have a MMS copyright on pretty much my language throughout my
Mhm.
life, because it has changed how I work things. Um, Today at 11:45, I met with the girls basketball team, and we talked about performance goals and what they needed to think about and what they're identifying they're doing well, and how they can peer coach to be better teammates to increase their performance on the court, right?
Oh, I love that.
And that was it was just an invitation from their coach, and we just had a conversation because I think empowered girls empowering each other will make their prom planning and all the other things that
Right.
girls spat about later, like, it makes them just deeper, but it does increase their performance, there is no question. Um so yeah, I think all of those things maybe answer your question.
How do you define winning? I ask everybody this.
Yeah, I saw that one too and went, oof, that's a good question. You know, for me, winning is truly the becoming part of our journey. Um, don't get me wrong, like, I drove into mental management and I told you it was because I wanted my daughter to perform where she was before, because it was killing me to see her be hurt and panicked and anxiety and all those things. So we have an "I love me" wall, right? Of all the girls' things, we call it the "I love me" wall. A fellow archery dad that we coach the kids gave us that term. But I think I define winning as the opportunity of us to be better than we were yesterday. And we have a responsibility to help others get there too. I think that's probably my definition of winning, because that builds all of our becoming of our permanent humanhood, right? I call it, because if we could be anything in the world, I think being kind and being objective to what's going on are our biggest assets and traits that we have to use. So being better than I was yesterday and helping other people do the same, to me, is winning.
Oh, I love that. Being better than I was yesterday and
Mm-hmm.
encouraging others to do the same.
Right.
You know, if we
Like I
all
love
did
Maya
that.
Angelou, right? And she used to
Yeah.
say, do the best you can until you know better, then do better, right? And so
Hmm.
that's where I'm at, I think.
Wouldn't the world change if everybody adopted that philosophy?
Yes,
It would
100%.
be so nice. Okay, next question. If
Okay.
you, I mean, and you might not be able to pare it down to one thing,
Okay.
but what was a piece of advice you've been given that changed or made a drastic impact in your life?
Two things, I think. One is through all of the training, one thing that stuck out to me in training is that we spend a lot of time in our head. And if we spend all that time in worry, then that part puts rubbish in our head as well, right?
Hmm.
And the things that are out of our control need to be out of control of our mind. I think that is one piece that sticks with me forever. So I
Hmm.
often say we live so long in our head, make sure that you renovate it so it's a good place to live.
Ooh,
It's
I
kind of
love that.
yeah, so that's one of the
Okay.
things I say for sure. I think the second thing though is my maternal grandparents were homesteaders to South Dakota in a sheep herder wagon, right? Like my mom is the baby of the family and she is in her upper 70s. And I will never forget that my grandpa Jack would say, and my grandma Alberta would follow it, right? And so worked hard their whole lives living was hard work, and would say, you never know if you're the only Bible somebody will ever read. That's responsibility. Take it seriously, right? And so as a young kid, I was like, yes, grandpa, because I loved them, right? But they passed away. My grandma passed away when I was an eighth grader, and my grandpa when I was a sophomore. And it's now that I take it so much more seriously because it's even beyond faith, right? It is your actions might be the only actions somebody ever sees as right or wrong, or
Hmm.
that it's okay to care for somebody, or it's okay to stop and take a moment for somebody, or whatever the case that is. And I truly, my cup is filled with servant leadership. Serving others is something that fills my cup. And so I think that's a piece of advice that probably rings as duty to me still today. And they passed away in the 80s. So, yeah.
I think that that just reminds me of the importance that you might be the only positive interaction that somebody has all day or maybe
All day
all
long.
week or all year.
Yes. Yes.
And why not choose to smile at everybody? You don't know how much that smile can make a positive impact on someone, and it's so easy to do.
Case in point. Can I share a story?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I was in Atlanta last week for Leading Now, and it was a cool experience. And it was superintendents across the nation, and we just talked about concepts and needs and what students need across the nation and all those things. But it was like a 24-hour turnaround, and I'm coming back to go to work on Friday and then host a state tournament Friday night and Saturday night because I mean that's what you do when you're crazy. Okay, so I am in Atlanta. That's where it was. My flight's late, so I get to the Minneapolis airport late. I come booking off the plane, and I'm clearly have a face, right? Because there is a gentleman in a cart and says, "Where do you have to go?" I tell him, and he says, "How long do you have?" I say 18 minutes or whatever, and he goes, "Sister, I'm your only prayer. Get in." And so I get in, and he honks, and he gets me there, and we have 2 minutes prior to 2 minutes before we go, right? Just in time for me to go to the restroom, and I have my carry-on with me in the restroom. I go to the bathroom, and then I hear flights canceled, and my husband calls and says, "Penny, a bunch of flights are getting canceled." And I was like, "Yep, look at me. I'm one of them." So I stepped out of the bathroom to hear the announcement and be on my phone. Guess what I forgot in the bathroom? My carry-on. So somebody turns it in, it gets locked up
Oh no.
downstairs and lost and found. And now I'm stuck in the airport. And the airport hotel is full. So I can't get my carry-on until 7:30 the next morning, and my flight at that point was sectioned for 8:20, and I'm going to have to get out of the airport to Lost and Found and then come all the way back through security. So I'm a little anxious at this time, having to use my own recovery strategies,
Hmm.
right? Like it'll be okay. It is what it is, whatever happens, I'm still going to get home. It's not like I'm never going to get home,
Hmm.
and preloading that. So to your point about people and how we treat others and taking time, I go ahead and I exit the airport to get to Lost and Found. I'm there a little early. There's a button on the door. I'm like, well, what the heck? Maybe she's here early too. He or she push the button. I meet a lovely lady who's like, oh, tell me what it is. I have a Team USA carry-on, go figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was nice because it was very identifiable. And the gentleman that I asked directions to Lost and Found, I explained to him what had taken place because I flew Delta. And he shows up just as she's bringing the carry-on out and said, you know, I got to thinking you said 8:20. I need to help you get through security. So the lady's wonderful, answers the door early. That gentleman literally takes me by the elbow, like he's escorting me through a wedding, and he gets me clear to the scanner of security. I mean, it was amazing. And so I think that's an example of just everyone took time to do the best that they could. I get back upstairs and there's this young man, soldier, just finished basic, super excited to come home. And he had tears in his eyes the night before when I got canceled because I'm sure he's really ready to be home. And I said, did you get any breakfast, buddy? Because I think we're finally going to get on this plane in like an hour. And he was like, you know, I'm really coming home with nothing. And I said, oh, well, then we need breakfast, right? Because here were these people that made it all happen for me. I could,
Pay it
I
forward.
mean, totally
Mm-hmm.
buy, yeah, pay it forward with Caribou, right? So Caribou was right by our gate and he ate some breakfast sandwiches and whatever the case is. So I think that's our job, period, regardless of our profession.
You know what I think is interesting too about this story is I think those people helped you and we're so grateful to help you, partially because of your attitude as well. Because I know you well enough to know that you weren't snarky and even if
Oh, no,
inside your
no,
head you were frustrated, your
yes,
frustration never shows on your face. And I think it's important that people realize that no matter how frustrated you are, no matter how difficult life is, other people don't need your negative energy. And so when you're able to give that positive energy out, you typically will receive it back.
yes. I hugged the gentleman that got me through security.
Thank you so
And you know
much.
what? The new officer slash soldier that will protect our rights, he hugged me too, right? So it
Yeah,
was one of those deals where, yeah, yeah, what a story. But anyway, I feel like that's probably the best piece of why we do what we do and what's winning. Like that's life winning. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And you get back what you put in. Like
you
in
do.
general,
Yes.
in life, you get back what you
100%.
put in. Well, Penny,
Hmm.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
spending time with me. If you like this episode, feel free to click that little like button, share it with a friend. If you're not a Patreon member, I highly recommend you join Patreon because Penny's going to spend more time with me. And we're going to talk about ways that maybe specifics about what is a recovery strategy? How does she use it in her personal life and in her work life and in archery? Let's talk about it. So join Patreon.